Ah, of course. Who would forget such a thing? All right. So let's just see where we are. We should be. Do you guys have access to? Yeah, there we go. Took a second. So this is our front screen, Humans 2.0, and we will continue from here. So you're in the right place if this is what you signed up for. So first things first, just want to land everybody on the logistics before we get into any of the content for the day. We've basically, as you guys probably might have seen on the landing page and that kind of stuff, our intention is to be covering three big buckets of human beingness, right? Fundamentally, our biological, our psychological, and again, ontological will say because it works with the endings, the suffixes, but fundamentally meaning, mystery, purpose, etc. So you could say body, mind, spirit. I prefer not to, just because spirit is such a wonky term. But that would be our general buckets. So today we'll jump in to kind of what you might say is not flow hacking 101. We've covered that elsewhere, and we're happy to sling any of that information that you guys would like or are interested in your way if this is your first dip into these waters. But in general, we're going to do our best to kind of give you a higher level overview of that. Week two, we will discuss kind of the hedonic engineering. We're fundamentally harnessing peak states in service of access to information, healing, inspiration, connection. So how do we do that? And how do we do that in a much sort of mature and responsible way, given the potency of those tools? Weeks 3 and 4, we will get into what we're loosely just calling sort of four-dimensional psychology, which is fundamentally what does it mean to go beyond our skin encapsulated egos, like I, me, mine, and my little stories of seeking pleasure and avoiding pain, and the last 150 years or so of Western psychology into ways of that better match, I guess you could say, our current moment, that better match multi-perspectival, paradoxical and contradictory realities, and that are at least compatible with some of the technological and social accelerations that we're all experiencing. And that's everything from AI to transhumanism to transgenderism to the singularity to like what on earth does it even, to genomic editing. Like, what does it mean to be a human these days? So we'll be covering some of that. And then weeks 5 and 6, we will get into, okay, if the premise of weeks 1 and 2, let's say, is that you can engineer and or architect your consciousness via the knobs and levers of body brain interventions. So let's say that's a working peak state.
Jamie,
Then
you just lost
weeks
your
five.
audio for 5 seconds.
Okay. So if weeks 1 and 2 are about harnessing your neurophysiology to access high information states, then weeks 5 and 6 will be a little bit more what does it mean to navigate and make sense of those states? And I would argue that one of our biggest lacks right now, and also liabilities, is as we've had a breakdown in both traditional, old school organized religion and secular materialism, let's just kind of say post European Enlightenment, material senses, that kind of stuff, into that void, we're having all sorts of wonky shit show up. So people who are doing their own research, people who are going down YouTube algorithms, et cetera, and even the sort of the overt train wrecks of the psychedelic renaissance, of the kind of the implosion, a lot of Eastern meditative, contemplative, neo tantra, take your pick, right? The entire non-conventional, ecstatically informed toolkit or offerings these days are often leading people into some wonky and kooky and sometimes outright dangerous places, either unsafe for them and their own sanity and psychology, unsafe for relationships, or even unsafe at a socio-political level as to the conclusions that people come to. So we'll be discussing that kind of stuff. That said, as I was laying this out this weekend, I noticed resistance in myself. I was like, fuck me, I don't want to actually teach it this way. Right? Yes, we're going to cover those buckets, and we will be kind of weaving them, and and for sure in your boat teams where you guys get together with boat team captains, and you're working small groups, we will get to be quite practical, and we will progress more through this progression, more through this sequence as it's laid out. But what I wanted to kind of ask you guys is kind of permission, to be a little bit more messy and a little bit, in the service of trying to play jazz versus pulling the thing apart, putting it in three distinct, discrete buckets, and then hopefully trying to assemble it into something. I'd like to be able to, if we can just kind of speak to it and through it as we go, then hopefully that will help, and that'll help us get to some of the more interesting places. Um, so that was our week by week over the next 6 weeks. Each week, this is the sort of bare minimums. These will be our recurring gatherings. So on Mondays, and part of this was, and this was input from Tim, who many of you might have met through admissions. Tim is also one of our boat captains, along with Christian and Megan. So feel free to raise your hand, guys, just to say hi. But that was one of Tim's points, was like, hey, a lot of people just want help, guidance, encouragement, accountability on nailing the basics. And if they could nail the basics, that would be really transformational. That would make all the difference in the world into where people's lives are, how they feel, their energy focus, concentration, capacity, that kind of stuff. So this is the first time we've done it in this kind of way, where we're doing both a conceptual, intellectual program. We're teaching a bunch of ideas and frameworks and theories, but then also just being like, actually, let's just get it done together as well, right? So if you would like to, we would highly encourage you to also just show up on Mondays. We'll do, I think we'll try and keep our workouts to under 45 minutes, and it'll be the kind of thing. If you're already just rocking your physicality, don't worry about it. If you, on the other hand, have any kind of wellness, fitness, health goals this year, jump in, because I'll show up, and we'll do it together, and hopefully it will be fun, and a good way just to kind of add that foundational level. Boat teams, you guys have already, most folks have already chipped in on your polls as to which times work best, but between Tuesday, Wednesday will be your boat team slots. We will be firming those up in the next 72 hours. So if you haven't yet, please, please, please put in your vote so that we know where you sit and we can land everybody from different time zones and geographies. Thursdays, it's where we are right now. That's our seminars. And then we will be doing some specific single scheduled things, specifically Grief Cafe, where we will this will just be a fun experiment for us to do via Zoom. But if anybody's familiar with it, it's a kind of a worldwide movement, and it's just an opportunity for folks to be able to bring and present what is heavy on their hearts. And we'll share the format and the structure. It's very nice, non-cringy, not oversharey, that kind of thing. And we're just going to conduct some of these experiments together. This is really us just jumping in and seeing what we can co-create. FSDR is flow state deep rest. If anybody follows Andrew Huberman, he and I were actually together as he was articulating that probably 5-6 years ago at a Stanford neuroscience conference. We went into a wood paneled library, and we lay down with a Harvard neuroscientist, a SEAL Team 6 commander, Andrew and me. I think that might have been it. And then instantly, if I hear someone snoring, I think it was the SEAL. But anyway, from that, which at the time was just a borrowing of Yoga Nidra, which is is exactly this. It's a liminal threshold relaxing thing. He then recoined it NSDR, non-sleep deep rest. We've added a few fun tweaks and twizzles, but consider this basically power napping for people who would never give themselves permission to nap. So that will be a fun sort of little protocol to share. Our dynamic breath work will be another opportunity to do something fun together. Put on headphones, have a spot on your floor, and an hour, and we can see what we can do. And then a gospel brunch, which will potentially be an articulation of what does post-conventional. I wouldn't even say religiosity, but post-conventional reverence, awe, community culture. So basically, TED Talk, karaoke, and brunch is what we would be shooting for, right? So basically, a Western rational mysticism. So that's kind of both weekly, what to think of, and what's over the duration, as well as what's going to be happening within each week. I just want to touch on this. This should be posted, and you don't need to buy any of these if you don't want to, or if reading is hard or not up your alley. But on the other hand, if you want to understand some of the foundations of where this program is coming from, and you want to go back to primary sources, go back to the bibliographies of these books themselves, and kind of take another deeper cut, would strongly encourage it. You won't go wrong reading these books, and they will definitely add more to your experience. So Prometheus Rising on the right-hand side, on the left-hand side, Robert Anton Wilson, very interesting philosopher, writer, thinker from the 60s through the kind of 80s and 90s. This is his reworking, funnily enough, of Timothy Leary. This is his PhD dissertation turned into a popular book, and it's his reworking of Timothy Leary's 8 neurobiological circuit model, which I thought I was just going to read because I needed to read the deep cuts in my field. And I thought it was going to be hokey and like 70s and kind of outdated and this and that. And I was actually blown away by how interesting this is when it comes to the body and the brain shaping mind. So consider this kind of loosely in our physical bucket, right, of learning. The next one, this one hasn't come out yet. It's coming out next week. Michael Pollan. I just wrote a Substack, funnily enough, on the ends of 21st or 20th century psychology. If you haven't come across it, feel free. We're going to unpack it again in much more detail in this course. I wrote it last week on behalf of this course about to happen. But Michael Pollan's new book will be What is the Nature of Consciousness and Mind? So that will be a fun one to dive into. This next one, Jim Marion's Putting on the Mind of Christ. Doesn't matter what, you could be atheist, agnostic, recovering something, never dabbled, curious, whatever. It all fits happily within this book. This book is a former Catholic monk who's actually using developmental models and theory. So if anybody's familiar with Bob Kegan's work at Harvard, who we refer to often, or spiral dynamics, which has become a kind of bastardized, more popularized version. The key here is simply what this book, I think, offers people is if you have issues with either from being a part of it and stepping out or having never been a part of it and always kept it at arm's length, an organized traditional religion, right? That is one level of development of relating to the mystery. And as you develop, you quite often outgrow previous levels of relating to that. So for instance, I doubt very many of us on this call, when it's thundering, think the gods are angry or bowling in heaven, right? We've outgrown that primitive animistic version, but quite a few people tend to equate religion and all of the practices that go with religion, including singing, including gathering, including community service, including inspirational scripture, including attempting to live by a code of ethics, including all sorts of really positive, healthy things, tend to associate that with a specific traditionalist, our way or the highway level of relating to the mystery. And what this book does is just simply provide a roadmap for I don't have to be done. And it doesn't have to be either or just because I outgrew that particular shell at one developmental stage of being. So highly recommend that if any of that is alive for you. And then the last two are ones that I wrote, not because I wrote them, but because obviously the content is the closest to this course. So hopefully feel free to check those out. They can live on your bookshelf and you can feel smart, or you can listen to them on Books on Tape or anything else like that. All right, that said, and by the way, also deep cuts, right? Bonus is if you're reading them as we go and you want to bring them up, you want to help unpack deeper cuts on passages, you want to highlight contradictions or applications or anything else like that. So strong encouragement for the power users among us. If you really want to suck the marrow out of this program, consider those books. Obviously, unless you're just a power reader and you're watching it on 1.5x on Audible, you might not get through all 5 in the duration of this program. But on the other hand, the more you lean in, the more you will for sure get out of it. Okay, so I hope that tracks for everybody so far. So now I just want to take a moment and just kind of quickly bang through how we do teaching and learning, and hopefully kind of community culture and norms and best practices. So the first is just to realize what we're doing right now. It would be easy through just the limitations of digital learning to think that this is the course, right? Me sharing ideas, and hopefully ideas that are new or fresh or interesting, or you can't get someplace else, right? In reality, it's a quarter of it. It's a quarter of it. The value you're going to get, half of it is going to come from what you guys do together, right? And that is gathering and meeting in boat teams. That is communicating and having conversations and dialogue within school, within our learning platform, right? And our gatherings, doing our Monday morning workouts, showing up for the breath work, showing up for the Grief Cafe, actually showing up and doing stuff together in this cohort. All right. So only a fraction is one way, didactic, me getting to share content. And then the other quarter, equally as important, is you actually paying attention in your own life and figuring out what you want to adapt, not just adopt, right? Very, very little of this will just be adopt it wholesale, one to one. Like, here's a suggestion. Oh, I do that exactly, and it works perfectly for me. There will be much, much more that you will need to adapt. You'll be like, oh, this is 15 degrees off, or this is 45 or 90 degrees off. What works for me? But now that I've got a backboard or something to think about, or an experiment to try, now I have clarity on what is right for me. And then there will be the ongoing question, which is because we are the Flow Genome Project, right? The whole premise of it is to say, hey, what is autotelic in my life? And that's just a fancy word, right, that comes out of flow research to saying it's so wonderful, so positive, so self-rewarding, so enjoyable, so meaningful that I do it without having to burn willpower, without having to grind grit, right? With none of the oughts and shoulds. I am simply drawn to this as a natural unfolding of my being. Like, that's arguable. I mean, that is not arguably. That is why we call ourselves the Flow Genome Project. It wasn't how do you get into flow states. That's actually pretty straightforward. Right? It's how do you harness the natural autotelic nature of flow states and other peak states in service of us growing up and showing up as good people. Right? So hopefully that tracks for everybody. So please, please remember this. I can only contribute a quarter of the value that we want you guys to get from this. Half is together and another quarter is you. Okay? And we will absolutely
Jay,
be here to support that. Yes, sir.
real quick, what does FAFO stand for? FAFO.
Fuck around and find out. Yeah. So basically your own iteration and experimentation. Right. And so I think, I mean, I still, I'm open to this. I could be a waste of space and a lazy bastard. It's entirely possible. But on the other hand, I've kind of tried to live my life noticing what am I naturally and intrinsically drawn to, and what is requiring, what do I either experience resistance, or do I need to continue to prime the pump with additional effort? And I try and notice, right, in a sort of more Taoist way, what does going with the flow look like and where does it lead? So the fuck around find out is, okay, maybe for 6 weeks I can just do it because I'm being asked to, and there's social pressure or educational support, whatever it might be. But after that 6 weeks, what do I stick with? And really, that 6 to 12 weeks, 6 to 24 weeks, that's where your real learning is going to happen. Not in the structures of this course. Within the structures of this course, we're going to serve up a lot of stuff, right? But you noticing, what sticks for me in my life, and why does it stick, and why do other things not stick? Right? It's the unlock, because that's where we're going to actually learn how to learn. And I will probably mention this quote again more than once because I find it one of the most, inspirational ones that Bob Keegan ever said, which is he said, at some point, we go from problems we're trying to solve, right? Very agentic, very active, very biohacky, flow bro-y kind of thing. Like or Tony Robbins affirmations, just believe it, you can achieve it, that kind of thing. Problems we're trying to solve, to problems that solve us. And that is a complete inversion of all of our hustle and grind culture. And it is that sense of, how do I learn how to learn to become myself? and to do it with as much ease and joy. And it doesn't mean we slack in any way, but right, ease and joy and an intuitive naturalness that we can follow and build on. Okay. So yeah, thanks, Tim, for that clarification. Yeah, Katie, what you got?
Two things. So I'm brand new to all of this as of last week.
Great.
So I'm excited to be here. Flow states. So I really could use my own introduction to flow states to kind of get up to speed. And what would you recommend there?
Beautiful. Well, I mean, in the simplest sense, right? A flow state is a peak state or a non-ordinary state. So it's not one we're in all the time. It is accessed through all sorts of different doorways, and it could be anything from endurance sports to extreme sports to meditation to breathwork to psychedelics to sexuality to deep immersion in nature to creativity and art to gardening and bird watching. So, like, numbers of avenues in are almost infinite. And it tends to have, I mean, there are different researchers that have different length checklists and charts. The simplest that we really like is the acronym STER, STER, and several of these tend to arise, in a given flow state. It's a sense of selflessness. So I no longer have my inner narrator, my inner critic, right? That kind of inner voice goes quiet. Timelessness, in the sense of I often feel that I have all the time in the world, right? So it either slows down or speeds up, or so it could be like I was on a 10-hour ultra marathon and it felt like 90 minutes. Or it could be I was flipping and spinning and twisting on a snowboard half pipe at the Olympics and it felt like I had all the time in the world, right? So time dilation or distortion often happens, but whatever it is, it tends not to be our regular day-to-day clock time. Effortlessness, the whole reason it got the name was Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, the sort of godfather of the movement, was like, well, people kept on using that word to describe it. Right? It was fluid. It was easy. Something that I had struggled with suddenly became effortless. So selflessness, timelessness, effortlessness. And then the fourth one is often that, in that state, especially with my inner critic quiet, I'm no longer, that bandwidth is freed up, right? I'm often quite embodied and I'm often in a high neurochemical state. Then richness, information richness often comes with it. And that would be like the Archimedes in the bathtub, the eureka moments, the ahas, right? Because my normal gatekeepers of my prefrontal cortex and my executive function, right? Those kind of elements often go offline. And into that space often arises lots of pattern recognition, lots of, so that's the sort of synthesis, your chocolate and my peanut butter. It could be some, long, hard problem I've been noodling on and haven't been able to crack. It could be some emotional, relational insight, or could even be, inspirational and non-dual. So hence the back end of this program to be discussing kind of the mystery, discuss, the topics that were often the foundations of religion. So that would be flow states in a nutshell. And you've also just modeled really beautifully No Dumb Questions, which I think is also on this slide. So I hope that helps as far as an initial intro. Stealing Fire, the book that I wrote 2017, goes into quite a bit of this in the first section. So hopefully you can just feel free to check that out if you'd like, or even just Google and ask a abominable LLM, and it'll give you a similar thing. Okay. Does that answer your question, Katie? I just want to make sure that you're sorted before we move on.
Yeah. I just wanted to get kick started off in the right direction, because sometimes it can become a rabbit hole if you do your own research.
Perfect. Okay, so no need to belabor these. There's so much more I want to get into today, but just fundamentally, we operate, and this comes from our background in outdoor guiding and everything else, is that if people are safe and fun, they're going to learn. So don't try and front load the learning ahead of feeling safe and fun. But also, we're not safe. We're not a padded room. We are here to push edges. And it's also back to our outdoor guiding experience, right? You can't make things safe. You can manage risks. So our goal is to have everybody feel psychologically, socially, physically and spiritually safe here in this community of practice, right? But beyond that, we want to push it to the limits. Okay. Therapy class training. We don't do therapy where the patient is always right. We do class, right, which is the rigorous interrogation of ideas and letting them knock heads and seeing where evidence, where logic, where consistency, where insight really match up, and trainings. We actually will be doing some physical things together, but trainings, the intention is to take people into spaces that they're not used to in order to stretch and grow. So we are not therapy, but we are classes. We do class and training. Okay. Radical responsibility. In fact, and Katie, you just modeled this very well, which is we actually have folks, this is at least as wide a spectrum of people and people who have experience with us and our content and just general neck of the woods. This is at least as wide as we've maybe ever had. About a third of the folks in this course are what we would, sort of call whatever power users, folks who have taken multiple programs with us, folks who have been members of this community for months to years, and I am imagining are here because they really want to send it and they really want to get deep into content that we haven't necessarily covered in as much detail. And then there's other folks that literally just serendipitously open an email they may or may not regularly open, and they were like, oh, wow, that seems neat. I'd like to try it. So we really want to make sure that everybody gets what you came for out of this program. Now, if it's something that's totally left field and that we're not going to cover it, we'll let you know as soon as possible, and we'll try and connect you with resources, information, etc., so you will get that experience regardless. But in general, please, 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 don't be bored, don't be confused, don't be underwhelmed, don't be overwhelmed, right? Speak up and make sure you're getting out of this what you want. Permission to be messy, again, is I don't know, I'm confused, I'm overwhelmed. Anything at any point, please just jump in. It doesn't have to be polished, it doesn't have to be slick, it doesn't have to be clever or witty or galaxy brain. Just show up and be like, I don't know. I just need to stop the tape right now and ask for or say whatever it is I have to say, and we can fumble through it together. All right. If for any reason anything gets you, right? Anything hijacks you, please just ask. Right? By design, we're going to be talking about potentially edgy, potentially controversial, potentially sticky subjects. That is, hopefully where we have some use and some meaning. So if for any reason any of it's getting you, please just speak up and notice that it's getting you. Right. So sexuality, substances, God, politics, spirituality, sex, drugs. Well, God, sex, drugs, politics. We're not discussing politics. We're not discussing the state of the world in this course. So that one's off the table for the most part. Right. But everything else is on the table. And if there's any backgrounds for you that are tough on that, just please own it. But then also please check in and we can have those discussions. Okay. Challenge by choice means none of this is required. We're discussing content. If anything goes against moral, legal, ethical, or cultural guidelines, professional, anything else, just simply take on that part informationally. There's zero requirements or expectations that anybody does everything. We're simply describing the menus, describing protocols, describing research. You pick and choose what is right for you. We don't care what conclusions you come to by the end of this program. We do care that you come to rigorous, well thought out, durable, helpful, personal conclusions, right? So everybody says it. Every university says that we don't teach you what to think. We teach you how to think, and we teach you what to think. But hopefully, you guys can get a sense of that, right? This is an open toolkit for you guys. Known issues, these are just things that have often come up, especially on programs I facilitate. So I just want to kind of just give you a sense. If you haven't already figured it out, I tend to talk relatively quickly. If this isn't a first language, or if it's just I'm the alien speaking foreign languages, just let me know. I'm always happy to slow it down, always happy to offer a different example, simplify things, different, whatever. We don't be overwhelmed by that. Okay, NLD is just neurolinguistic discombobulation. Sometimes we might drop into a kind of shared, a shared state, especially via the stories, the language, the flow, etc. of it. And sometimes that can feel a little unmooring. Just ride that wave and enjoy it. Or again, just raise a hand to get a hand. Salty, I've already think I dropped an F-bomb at least once. I tend to use colorful language of all stripes. Sometimes it's profane and sometimes it's sacred and sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. The closer to the gate, the fiercer the dragons is the reason, which is basically saying, hey, don't believe that these discussions of human growth, peak states, non-ordinary realities, the mystery, spirituality, non-dual experiences, etc. They are far hairier than show up on pastel Instagram. So if you couldn't handle a little irreverence, that's a good filter up front. It's kind of like making people hike to Everest Base Camp instead of bringing them in by helicopter. If you couldn't handle the hike to Everest Base Camp, you shouldn't be on the mountain. So that's kind of where we both, just I'm also English, Commonwealth countries tend to drop more salty language, but hopefully that's okay with everybody. And if it's not, just let me know and I'm happy to rein it in. But in general, time to paint a colorful picture. True compassion. This is Chogyam Trungpa's idea. True compassion is different than idiot compassion. Many people in the kind of New Age spiritual world think of everything as very soft eyes and soft focus and whisper talk and and all that kind of stuff, and everything's acceptable and everything's what it is, and just et cetera, et cetera. And he makes a case that that's sort of idiot compassion. That is refusing to discern between that which is durable, good, true, beautiful, whatever it might be, and just simply what's being served up. We are much more fans of true compassion, which sometimes is a really sharp sword, right? So that doesn't mean we have any interest in being mean or cruel, but it just means we're not going to pander under the illusion that that is a more advanced or spiritual or developed position. We're happy to call bullshit on things. Dojo rules. I spoke of this a minute ago. There are probably a third of you that are actually, nominally intermediate to advanced students within our community body of practice content, right? Please don't be bored if that's you. Please know we're still revisiting this stuff forever ourselves. And please know that debriefing your earlier experiments, if you've already taken some laps on some of this content, is as or more valuable in your first exposure. And also that you play an invaluable role in helping and modeling learning the basics for others who are just newly exposed to some of this content. And this is, to me, very similar to Japanese martial arts. You can study with your teacher, who might be a black belt of 1, 2, or 3 degrees. And then once in a blue moon, there's a seminar with their master teacher. And they might be like a 6-degree black belt. And you go to those seminars and there's hundreds of people instead of just 30 or 40 people. And what does that super duper master teach you? Ikkyo. First movement. And that's the thing you learned the first day you stepped in the dojo with your teacher. And what is his teacher's teacher teaching you? Ikkyo. And what do all the senior students learn that day? Ikkyo. And they go back to learning, okay, what are the nuances? What are the tweaks? Never the same river twice. How do I come back to this? Right? And then the 5-finger death punches, right? Those come later. And it is entirely up to this community, this gathering of folks, how far into this stuff we get. So please don't be like, oh, been there, done that, already seen that. What's next? What's new? Please let's really think of this as a community of practice, right? Where we return again and again and again to the foundational things and hopefully learn always looking for nuances and tips and tricks. I think the simplest is jazz. My commitment to you guys is I want to be a little messy on purpose. That doesn't mean we don't have structure. It doesn't mean we don't know where we begin and end. It means I'm trying to get to a thing that we don't often get to in these courses. And if I overly structure it, it's going to get squished out. So this is my commitment, is the Humans 2.0 thing. And I just want to ask for your guys' permission in advance. Can we, if we listen together, can we pull out something really neat that we wouldn't have got to without each other all being present? And then the final one is just, last warning. If you have any option, take the goddamn blue pill, people. Right? This is not like this. The premise of this program, right, is both this. This is Buckminster Fuller 101. This is something we stand by and why we teach what we teach. Right? Is can we all just show up and be good to each other in a world that needs it? right? And can learning some of these techniques and practices help us do that, right? So, as I said, this course is timeless. This is about the unfolding of a human, right? Versus the timely polycrisis, X-risk, geopolitics, whatever. We all know that's happening, and this is all I will say, right? But this is our bridge between that, the world we're living in right now, and the work we're doing in this program, because this is fundamentally what it looks like, right? Which is that if I work on myself and my cup is full, then I can look and care for, in the immediate moment, right? Food, clothing, shelter, safety, right? Then I can expand. I can think of me now, immediate, just like primitive animal survival. And I can think of me now and next. I can begin strategizing about what happens tomorrow or next year, right? If I have that sorted, then I can start caring for kith and kin, family. How's my life partner? How are my children? How are my parents, etc.? Cousins, aunties, uncles. And I can not just think about them now, right? But if we're in a hurricane, right, or an earthquake or a wildfire, it goes back to me and mine now, right? You can see how outside events affect that. And if my family's thriving and I'm thriving, I can be a leader in my community, right? And I can help them strategize through different timeframes, the immediate to longer and longer term. And if I'm amazingly amped up and resourced, then I can be thinking of all humans everywhere, every when. So my time frame goes from me now to me and mine now and next to everyone everywhere, every when, even ancestors and descendants. You could even go, if you wanted to, all the way to kind of the Buddhist notion of all sentient beings, not just humans, right? All living things, the Gaia, the biosphere, whatever. So what I want you to notice about this is not just it's a little nesting doll chart, but that enlightenment, right, the bodhisattva at the end, everyone, everywhere, everyone, is not a fixed rung on a ladder, right? It's not a fixed destination. You don't go to an Esalen retreat or to an ayahuasca retreat down in Peru and come back and be like, I'm that. You get hit on the head with a hammer, right, or kicked in the nuts, right? You're back to, oof, me now. Right? And this is a sliding scale of capacity, and it pulses and ebbs and flows based on our energy levels, based on our resources, and based on external conditions. So this is kind of, hopefully, so it's not just the plurality of how big do I care, but it's the time frame, right? Both things are happening at the same time. Okay. Is everybody doing okay so far? I hope so. Because again, like I said, I don't get to see your shining faces right now. I'm kind of in the, when I share screens like this, I end up being just blind to it. So now we're going to jump in. So that's the introduction. That was the hellos, how are yous, what to expect from the course and the program, all of that kind of stuff. And now we're going to jump into what this is actually about. Because Humans 2.0, on the one hand, can sound pretty straightforward. It almost sounds software-ish with a 2.0 kind of idea. But really, the attempt here is to take a contemporary unpacking, is arguably one of the oldest inquiries in human development, which is how do we become anthropos? And if you remember, the logo or the image for this course is a version of Leonardo's Vitruvian Man, right? I think that's a pretty good description, which is integrated, balanced. If anybody hasn't seen the particulars of the Leonardo, when it's a square with a circle, like all the geometries line up, they match the body proportions, right? And it's somewhere between, Buddha, Bodhisattva, Nazarene, Christ figure, et cetera, et cetera. It's just integrated, balanced human. But it also means something more, right? It means, have you gone from being a firstborn human, born once, the first time, seeking pleasure and avoiding pain, and living inside your stories, which is how almost all of us have done it? Or have you gone through a threshold, right, of dying before you die, of some form of initiatory passage that leaves you fundamentally a different person on the other side? and leaves you on the other side, right? No longer just running your primate programming of pleasure pain, right? Grabbing one, avoiding the other. And does that allow us to step into a more full, more courageous, more playful, more creative, more helpful, more powerful expression of this human experience of ours? So when we say the anthropos, we're kind of referring to that idea of a twice born human, right? And so this is all metaphor. None of this is, we're in the realm of metaphor. And as I said earlier, I didn't want to just start at the building blocks of the body stuff and do that. I actually wanted to start today in the deep end, right? So that you can both, hopefully we can then hold that for the duration of the program. And then you can also ask any questions that might come up. So what is that process? In many traditions, especially in the West, it's called the Great Work. What is that process of becoming a twice-born human? And this goes back to indigenous shamanistic stuff all the way to the ancient Greeks and the Eleusinian mystery schools, to the early Gnostic Christians, to the Western alchemists, the Kabbalists, to Buddhists and Taoists, to anybody. Like, look around the world, there is some version of this project. So what is it? And can we unpack some elements of it? What is out there in the world today? What are we swimming in? What are our reference points? Is it optimal psychology? Is it New Age religion? Is it biohacking and personal optimization? Is it psychedelic medical research? Is it neo-shamanism? Where are we coming from? What's in our news feeds? Who are we following and tracking? And how much of that is good signal and contributes to unpacking this great working? And how much of it is actually kind of noisy, distracted, commodified, commercialized gobbledygook? And can we, simplify so that we're not as confused or overwhelmed as consumers in these marketplaces? And then fundamentally, if there is a way to die before we die, if there is a way to step into a higher energy, and I don't mean this in a kind of woo-woo way, I just mean like a higher vitality, state of being, way of being, how might one live in or in alignment with the light? And I've never said this out loud in a course. So that's what I mean about like being willing to play jazz a little bit. What I would propose here is simply that if you guys are comfortable with it, we'll define it right now and you can check to see if you are, that we will use the notion of the light as a very vague placeholder for the fact that traditions for the last 3,000 years, East and West, have all referred to it. So in Buddhism, you have Shunyata, you have the Diamond Sutra or the Diamond Void. In Shakerism and Quakerism and many other and many Judeo-Christian traditions, there's notions of light. In near-death experiences, there's notions of light. In psychedelic research, there's notions of light. So somewhere, somehow, lots of even the fact of halos, right, show up again around the world. So you're like, never mind whether they exist, just the idea that religious iconography and art around the world have all referenced some version of light being connected to information, being connected to consciousness, being connected to source or Godhead, possibly even love. So you're like, all right, that would take decades to sort out, what's true or what you choose to work with in any of those A equals B equals C, so D equals A kinds of equivalences. But that would presumably be the idea, which is that if we can learn to tinker with our bodies and brains to create a consistently open, high information, high inspiration, lived experience for ourselves, what does it mean to live in congruence with that? Is that in any way different than living psychologically behind the eyes, enmeshed in our stories, seeking pleasure and avoiding pain? So these are the questions. Right? I just want to pose that. What would it mean to have access to light? What would it mean to be able to live in it or attempt to stay true in integrity and alignment? Right? And is that different than how we're living our lives right now? So before we do that, I'm just going to pause because I'd like to see you guys. How's everybody doing? And how is this so far? Doing okay? No yellow Lego thumbs needed. These are actual flesh and blood. All right. Okay. Well, if you guys are okay with this, hopefully you're in the right place. No one's screaming for the exits. And by the way, if we want to meet everybody, like I said, this is, I think, my hunch is this is as broad a spread of prior experience with us as we've had. So if somebody's here being like, I'm stressed out and tired, and I feel like I'm addicted to social media, and I thought I kind of came because I'd like to get over that hump, and I'd like to lose 15 pounds, like we got you, right? Um, if on the other hand you're like, I want the secret codes to God mode, like I read all the footnotes, in Recapture the Rapture, and I've been hounding you for the last 5 years. Like when are you gonna, like fill in the rest of the story? Um, I'd love to be able to play that game too. But again, for folks that are just kind of, test, check, you guys get to see. But I would like to assert that we love to play well outside the lines, but we also love to stick our landings. So hopefully that's okay with people. Are you guys okay then with
What does
the?
that
I
mean?
What does that mean? Is that you, JA? Of course it
Yes.
would be you, fucker. Um, fun. I mean, what I wanted to say, which of course I can't say because you have to come to that your own conclusion, is we're rational mystics. You can check our scratch work. We cite our sources. Within a defined container, we can play full out and we'll drop you off back on your front doorstep. That's it. That's it. I mean, there was
It didn't
a
didn't
slide
help.
I've said didn't help. So here's another one, right? Organizational promise, right? We talk about ecstasis, catharsis, and communitas. So peak states, ecstasis, deep healing, catharsis, and profound human intersubjective connection, communitas, right? So those are the three buckets. We talk about ecstasis without the crave of addiction to peak states. So can we work with higher ranges of non-ordinary states of consciousness and the means to get there without becoming addicts, right? Can we work with the boundary eroding vulnerability and healing of deep emotional, relational, embodied work without getting cringy, right? Without it being like excessively woo, et cetera, et cetera. Can we do that? So catharsis without the cringe. And can we get into communitas, deep connection together without the cults of unreliable leaders and unreliable followers? Right? So can we play in that zone with all these three things, which are both very powerful but also super problematic, right? And can we do that reliably, consistently, safely? So that is what I would want to offer. Right. Okay.
Thank
Does that help, JA?
you. Thank you.
Yeah. But I mean, of course, the only simple answer is, and don't fucking take my word for it, test it. Right. But that is where we stand. And again, like it's an irony of our lives that we're in this kind of, online social media personal growthy space. We're outdoor guides, we're academics, right? And we are practitioners of life. We've been doing this for 30 fucking years. So the fact that we're meeting within this milieu these days is just one of the accidents of reality, and we're playing through. So it's great to get to see and meet everybody this way, but it's not our first, second, or third choice as to how we do this thing. We love to be in big, beautiful, natural locations doing real shit together.